Up and at 'em!
Up and at them!
Up and at 'em!
Up and at them!
Better.
Movie accents are a strange thing. When they're done well, you don't even notice them. But when they're done badly, they completely take you out of the movie, causing the viewer to practically flinch every time the actor speaks.
Everything wanna be irie.
But when it comes to accents, producers and actors are between a rock and a hard place. As an actor, the very nature of the job demands that you're able to play a wide variety of roles, and depending on the budget, producers usually need known stars attached to even finance the film. This results in famous faces having to adopt not just new characters, but even new accents. The problem with this is that when the actor has to perform in an accent far outside their wheelhouse, the accent hijacks the performance rather than contributing to it, as they can no longer just memorize their lines and lose themselves in the moment. Now they have to stay consciously aware of the sounds coming out of their mouth as they speak them. As Australian actor Mia Wasikowska put it, doing an accent removes you from yourself and reminds you every instant that you're playing a part. This leads to different approaches when it comes to taking on a different dialect. Some actors just avoid it entirely. They accept their natural charisma got them where they are, so there's no point in toying with the recipe.
We could change your accent, lots of actors do that.
Well, he doesn't. How does he get away with it?
Again, we don't know.
Others decide to mostly keep their natural voice so you can still identify it's them and just slap a light accent on top of it. But the more ambitious actors really go for it, hoping to prove that there's nothing they can't do, which can go one of two ways: critical acclaim or humiliating failure. An obvious observation is that while foreign actors tend to be able to emulate an American accent, the same is often not true in reverse. There are many reasons for this. They probably grew up watching American movies and are therefore more familiar with American culture. They also often move to Hollywood over the course of their career, which allows them to pick up on the subtleties of American speech patterns and turns of phrase. And the US is so large, with slight vocal variations in each state, that any general American accent is likely to fit in somewhere. But I think it runs a bit deeper than that. Historically, the United States has always been a melting pot of different cultures, and philosophically was far more open to integration than anywhere else, as Reagan explained in his final speech as president.
You can go to live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go to live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American.
So while other countries can easily spot a fake accent and differentiate it from their native population, Americans are much more generous in their accent interpretation, and frankly far less nitpicky. As long as it blends in, it's fine. And there are only extreme examples where it still just doesn't work.
F you, Jim! You don't give me warnings, I give them to you, remember, because I can back mine up.
But what is it about certain movie accents that just don't pass the ear test? From what I can tell, when an accent is very different to the actor's original voice, they instinctively hone in on the key differences during their preparation. This then leads to them accidentally overpronouncing those distinctions so that they're always technically doing the accent. Like in Ocean's 11, Don Cheadle is aware that Cockney accents substitute H's in for T's, so when he says leave it out, it correctly comes out leave it out, but that doesn't automatically make it sound natural.
Oh, leave it out.
Notice how Don massively overcompensates on the out, so that the audience can hear the difference. So he's not just playing Cockney, he's accidentally playing the most Cockney man to have ever lived. This is a common mistake, and demonstrates that delivering the line in the right accent is in the very forefront of the actor's mind, as if he's thinking, don't forget to say it like this, which causes him to say it too much like that. He does this again later when he says sorting it out.
Problem is now they know their weakness and they're sorting it out. They're fixing it.
Notice how instead of eating the ow in sorting it out, so it's subtle and less noticeable, Cheadle is highlighting and dragging it, which I suppose would be fine if this was an animated comedy, but on film it just doesn't come across as plausible in any way. Jared Leto falls into a similar trap in House of Gucci, where he makes his Italian accent riddled with cartoonish cliches.
He doesn't scream like the others.
Over-rolling his R's and adding A's as if every word is a pasta. This makes the accent far more like this,
"It's me, Mario!"
than this.
When he was with you in Atrani, this is before or after you trip together to Sanremo?
Keanu Reeves showcases similar difficulties in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I was impotent with fear. I know where the bastard sleeps.
He's just doing too much here, but also doing it robotically like C-3PO. He's really anchoring each sentence with a single word. I was impotent with fear. I know where the bastard sleeps. But the accent is causing Keanu's face to belt forward as he proudly stamps on the B in bastard. So yes, he has correctly identified that English accents tend to say bastard instead of bastard, so we know he's going for posh English. But the accent is controlling his entire physicality, making him feel even more stiff and emotionless. There's just a huge difference between how a voice sounds when you build it from the ground up, as opposed to doing an impression. It's the audio equivalent of sitting in hair and makeup for hours of prosthetics and just sticking a funny nose and glasses on your face as a disguise. Take John Malkovich in Rounders, where he goes all in on his Russian accent.
Bet 15,000.
He overcooks every word. Instead of bet, it's biet, presumably because Russians say niet for no. For 15, he goes 15, but this one was a little more subtle. And then he highlights how Russians use a Z instead of TH with zauzand. While some of these are technically the correct changes to make, instead of the words calmly running into each other in a relaxed way, they're isolated and very consciously delivered. He's enunciating too much. For instance, notice how he really doubles down on his pronunciation of the word have as Kiev.
I don't have spades. You have my money?
Now, I don't know about you, but I've been around quite a few Russian people in my life, and this just doesn't ring true to me. Now, don't get me wrong, it is ticking a key box, which is being able to identify that this character is Russian. He's successfully doing that, but instead of these differences hiding between each word, Malkovich is emphasizing all of them, making the delivery sound clunky and therefore hard to lose yourself in.
I feel so unsatisfied.
The reality is that accents can humble even the greatest actors, as it makes them appear less natural when they're surrounded by other native-speaking cast members. For instance, in For Queen and Country, Denzel Washington attempts a Cockney accent, having prepared for the role by living with a local English family and drinking with them each night. But no matter how much prep he puts in, he vocally just can't compete with a native actor.
Who never thought you'd end up joining the army and get paid to be a hooligan?
Hooligan, look who's talking.
Even though these English actors are not necessarily Cockney either, notice how their voices have a lot more depth and texture to them than Denzel's, because he's still talking from the top layer of his voice box, like most people do when they're doing an impression.
You can put me out there as a front gunner to get me bleeding head blown off. I'm British then, yeah?
Yes, but you still become a British citizen.
You can't take it away from him, he's definitely trying to do an English accent, but natives don't try, they just do it without even noticing. A native's distinctive pronunciation will have, say, 30% impact, so it does stand out a bit, but then because you hear those sounds stand out as a distinction, when you try to emulate it, you're going to accidentally give it 90% impact, so it's way off balance. Basically, any untrained ear misses all the nuances and shades in between. Denzel admits that this was not his finest work.
The English accent was perfect.
Yeah. No, I wasn't.
That's the reason I didn't use an accent on this film. I was terrible in that. That accent was awful.
And due to his awareness of how much it undermined the performance, he refused to make the same mistake again in Gladiator 2. But by avoiding one mistake, he somehow walked headfirst into another. A New Yorker in ancient Rome.
The gods themselves want Rome reborn.
What is strange about this is that when it comes to historical movies, they tend to be filled with inaccuracies, especially in the arena of accents. Studios definitely want the productions to look like they're set in the right time and place, but when it comes to sound, they still need to be accessible to Western audiences, and that generally means no subtitles. So for box office reasons, the movie must be in English, but sometimes we get this weird mishmash of accents that feel out of place and even out of sync with each other. For instance, in Alexander, despite being in ancient Greece, Colin Farrell is doing a real Irish accent for some reason, his father Val Kilmer is doing a fake Irish accent, and his mother Angelina is doing a Russian accent by mistake in lieu of a Greek accent.
Never will there be an Alexander like you.
Not a real Greek or Macedonian accent in earshot. And this is quite common. No matter where the ancient story is set, movies tend to just go for an old proper English accent for their main characters. Because hey, at least it's old enough for our minds to be able to imagine it. The logic being that there was a British Empire as well as a Roman Empire, so they can all just blend together under the umbrella of ancient empires. So then why is Denzel getting criticism for his Bronx accent if everyone else around him is also doing inaccurate accents? Maybe it's just that we're not used to it. Cinema generally does one thing and Denzel is trying another. But there is something to a modern day accent intuitively feeling out of place in a time thousands of years ago. You know, long before New York ever even existed. Now, if everyone was doing the same accent as Denzel, you would probably adapt and forget about it. But instead it's just him, so he stands out too much, feeling a little like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure at times.
I'm Bill. This is Ted. We're from the future.
He's also not sticking with a consistent accent. Sometimes he sounds semi-proper English, or at least trying to neutralize his voice.
To amuse you is my only wish.
And other times he's just giving New York cop vibes, describing Paul Mescal's physique as strong jaw, good arms.
Strong jaw. Good arms?
All in all, it's not a bad performance, as you get to watch Denzel do his thing. But somehow this historical inaccuracy managed to highlight the much bigger problem with historical movie accents in general. However, it's not all bad. Some actors really do nail foreign accents. Think about Renee Zellweger in Bridget Jones' Diary. So much hinged on her getting this accent right, as not only does she narrate the entire film, but she's surrounded by other very English actors, like Hugh Grant and Colin Firth. If she had fumbled or hammed it up, the film would have completely flopped, but because she nailed it, the story is allowed to flow forward without the viewer ever even bumping. To the point that a lot of people are surprised to hear that she's actually from Texas.
I feel so proud to be in your beautiful movie.
Now, Zellweger obviously has a knack for it, but she does try to give Americans basic tips on how to sound more English by making every word more round in shape.
So you know that your jaw is going down and everything is round, so don't go sideways.
Unlike John Malkovich's overly enunciated Russian accent, Meryl Streep perfected her Polish accent in Sophie's Choice.
I have a presentiment and I have many fear and I...
Notice how, unlike the other failed attempts we saw earlier, Meryl doesn't oversell any particular word. She hides the subtleties of the accent in her running dialogue. This makes it ring true, but she also really infuses the mannerisms and energy of an Eastern European as she searches for the right words to say.
It will make me feel... how do you say that? Secure.
She humanizes the humbling experience of speaking in broken English, and is showing what level her character is at in her development with the language. Another key strength in her performance is how physically tight she keeps her jaw. See how her mouth doesn't open wide to announce every syllable. It's stoic, so she can sort of brush the words out of her mouth without overly delivering them. What's so impressive is that Streep's accent is simultaneously monotone and yet rich with texture at the same time. It genuinely feels like it's coming out of her voice box instead of her impression box. But as an Irishman, I've never been more impressed with an actor's accent than Cate Blanchett in Veronica Guerin. It's very difficult to pull off an Irish accent. I mean, my own might not even pass. But it seems to be near impossible for any American to get it right. As much as we appreciate the effort, we've seen so many countless bad Irish accents over the years that it sometimes makes you wonder, do we really sound like that? And the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle. We obviously do sound more like this than we like to believe, but not quite the levels of leprechaun that Americans want to imagine. It's a very breathy accent, so we hear a lot of actors exhaling over the dialogue to make it sound more like this. But the true Irish tone underlying it is never quite there. Let's take a look at some bad examples first, so we can recognise how much more natural Cate Blanchett sounds. Here we go. Cameron Diaz in Gangs of New York.
Try it and I'll bite you.
Nope, that's no. You can hear her natural voice underneath this thin veneer, but the real problem is that her real Californian accent is just too different to blend in with whatever she's attempting here.
Gentlemen, I leave you in the grace and favour of the Lord.
And this is another issue. When the script's dialogue is riddled with cliches, whether it's Cockney, Russian, or Irish, it makes it impossible for the actor to not be playing a caricature. A good accent always feels relaxed. It's there without having to announce itself. Yet here, Diaz might as well say, "Top of the morning to you laddies." Gerard Butler in P.S. I Love You.
Do all Irishmen sing?
Only the really well-hung ones.
This one is particularly disappointing, as Butler is Scottish and would have been far better off just doing his own accent, to be honest. While this might pass for a lot of viewers from around the world, Irish people know that there's a new accent every few miles on our tiny little island. This is not one of them. He's not from anywhere, as there's no distinctive rhythm to his delivery, making it sound robotic and confused.
You're going to be so impressed. I have a plan, baby. Can you believe it? I've written you letters. Letters that will be coming to you all sorts of ways.
And another casting issue is that Jared's accent doesn't gel with his parents' native tones. Compare the recording he left to his alleged mother reading a letter his character wrote.
When Holly visits, take her to my fort in the backyard and give her this envelope.
They sound completely unrelated. Now, children don't always have identical accents to their parents, but there are always at least some similarities that just aren't present here. And then of course Tom Cruise in Far and Away, a film stuffed to the brim with every Irish cliché imaginable.
Why can't you say it, Shannon? Why can't you say you like my hat? Why can't you say you like my suit? I've done well.
I won't harp on this too long, suffice to say that no, we don't like this. Funnily enough though, on the "I've done well," I have actually heard the type of thing he's going for there, as a lot of Irish people do go high-pitched when they're emotional. But he's dialed it all the way up to 11, it's too much. And then we go to Kate and Veronica Guerin.
Mom, I'm driving. Can you believe it? He let me off. He actually let me off. I love you, Mom. Talk to you.
Immediately I can tell she's meant to be from South Dublin. She really captures the repetitive rhythm of the Irish accent perfectly, from the bragging, "I'm driving," to "he let me off, he actually let me off," and then the quick "talk to you" at the end all flows beautifully. But it's not just her pronunciation, somehow her tone underneath sings in an Irish tune. Which is what I meant earlier by the difference between building an accent from the ground up and just doing an impression. It's not just how you're saying the words, often it's the vibrations underneath that give it away.
I mean, your hands are tied. You couldn't maintain 24-hour surveillance on that murder site without 24 staff. Maybe we should know that.
Unlike most attempts we've looked at so far, Kate isn't letting the accent control her. She's even managed to infuse her delivery with personality. I've genuinely met people who speak like this all over Dublin, so I can tell that Blanchett spent a lot of time around native Irish speakers to pick up on these subtle mannerisms. While most actors end up having to put on an old Ireland accent, Kate captures the modern local warmth of the Irish accent without ever resorting to hamming it up. Truly impressive. But a painful reality is that generally speaking, unless you're from the place that the accent is depicting, most audience members in the world won't even notice or particularly care. They just need the box ticked in their head that, okay, this character is this nationality, so that they can sink into the rest of the story. And that's fair, that's how it should be. Whereas if you are from that place, and the actor is overdoing every second syllable, it becomes really frustrating. While preparation is obviously key, actors need to be wary of not letting their new exciting accent dictate their character too much. Remember that most people don't even think about the fact that they have an accent. Their way of speaking is just normal to them, and that's why it feels authentic. So by trying too hard to convince the audience that this character is definitely from this place, you're already doing something unnatural, as that's not what real people do. But those are just some of my thoughts. How about you? Do you like it when actors try other accents? Or should they know their limitations? What's the worst movie accent you've ever heard? And on the flip side, what are the best examples that I failed to mention? Let me know in the comment section. So if you made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now click like, subscribe, and the notification bell, as otherwise that pesky algorithm will continue to suppress my videos from your feed.